So I'm Rossinger from Talis.
I'm Jonathan Rochkind from Johns Hopkins.
We're going to be talking about the umlaut, which is an OpenURL middleware layer written in Ruby on Rails. But before we talk about that, it kind of helps to have some sort of knowledge about OpenURL. So I'm going to try to go over OpenURL really, really fast. It's NISO z39.88. And basically it's a way to ask for context-sensitive services from a server about a particular thing. That thing is called a referent, and there are a couple other ways that you can describe context about the referent, like who you are or where you came from. And then supposedly the resolver will then send something back about that. So that thing that you're sending is known as a context object. It can either be sent as key encoded values, like an HTTP GET request, or through XML. These context objects are defined by community profiles, and that sort of is a bit of sanity checking about like what can actually appear in the context object. So you don't have, you're not requesting context about things that make absolutely no sense together. So you make your request, and as way of example, Jonathan came up with a good sort of example scenario, which is you're searching in an abstract index database. So for argument's sake, we'll say Scopus. And so you're presented with your list of citations. And you have a little button to click on. I don't have access to Scopus since I'm now, a corporate drone. But you would have a new window that opens up with a link resolver menu. And this is an example. This is Serial Solutions article linker, I think they call it. And you get all of this crap back on a page that the user has to navigate through and figure out what they want from our jargon and blah, 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 blah. This is what happens here is your citation, which is a journal in this particular case, goes against, in this case, Serial Solutions knowledge base, which is basically a database of journals and databases and ebook collections and with holdings, and determines whether or not your institution actually has access to this thing. If you're interested more in OpenURL, we're trying to actually form a community to actually make this spec more usable. It's a very big, hulking spec that's very hard to wrap your head around, and there's very little documentation about how to use it. So one of the things we're trying to do now is sort of bootstrap a community and to get people to be able to actually use it. This is the URL to go to where we're trying to form a community. So this umlaut thing, what we were trying to do, I worked at Georgia Tech, previous to Talis. What we didn't want to do was recreate that knowledge base layer. There's a lot of work there, a lot of labor that needs to go into maintaining that and making not only keeping up with holdings, but then actually linking into full text databases and whatnot. Georgia Tech subscribes to Ex Libris's SFX. It does that job really well, but what it didn't do very well, really, in our mind, was that we couldn't really make the interface work quite the way we wanted to. We had terrible usability studies with SFX. And there were other services we wanted to be able to do. We wanted to be able to query things that we couldn't store in a knowledge base, things like open access content, working papers, preprints, stuff like that. And there were things that we needed to do at a local level to be able to query for things that would have been difficult to pull off in SFX, especially for us since we had it consortially. So it was difficult for us to get access, write access to the server. So why we built the umlaut was it was actually part of another project that actually never was realized called the Communicat, which is a way for people to build their own personal libraries, and that together made a big collective library. But we thought the link resolver was a great place to start because we knew where the people were coming from, what they were looking at, and where they went. So we had all sorts of data about people and the sort of the usage patterns they were doing. Plus, at that time, SFX was terrible about resolving conference proceedings, especially from our most heavily used ANI database, which was Compendex. And this sort of gray literature thing that we couldn't really get into a knowledge base. We wanted to solve that, especially since Georgia Tech's collection is small and their resources are dwindling every year. So, as we have access to less and less licensed content, we needed to get more and more free stuff available to people. And the link resolver menu, as we see here, is a bunch of links that go to places that may not have anything behind them. It's sort of Lady or the Tiger. You have a bunch of doors. Something might be on the other side, or it just might lead to woe. So we created this thing called the umlaut. It went from just inspiration to launch in about 6 months and promptly crashed under the weight of it actually not being very well designed when we first launched. But then in about 3 days we got it up stable, and umlaut 1 started, was running okay. But there was definitely a duct tape and baling wire sort of thing about it, because we sort of hobbled a lot of hacks together in order to make this thing work. So we promptly started designing umlaut 2, and that's where Jonathan came in.
So at Hopkins, we were also interested in improving our link resolver interface, and we wanted to put our print holdings directly on that link resolver menu page instead of making people do that Lady or the Tiger click. We wanted to put Mark 856 URLs from the catalog directly on the page too, as we had some information in our catalog that wasn't in the link resolver. We wanted to integrate various local document delivery options right on that page, which we still haven't entirely done. We probably could have done all those things in SFX, because it is pretty customizable, but it would have been extensive customization to SFX. And we wanted a sort of loosely coupled interface flexibility to let us do an interface that wouldn't break when the new SFX version came out, sort of a separate layer of interface. So what umlaut is it provides a link resolver interface that lives on top of various data sources, such as SFX in our case, and also some other data sources. So I'm going to show you some example pages of... Pardon? Hit return? Yes, well, I don't need to show you that anyway, but I'm going to show you some example pages of umlaut as it's deployed today at Hopkins. Right now it's deployed. The first thing you notice is that, I made it all small, sorry. Instead of taking you to a menu at all, it takes you directly to the full text here, but in a frame set with this little banner up here that has some additional choices of sources of this. In case the first one didn't work, it has your citations, you can look for it. It has the help, ask a librarian for help links. It has see more options to get the full menu. And this was trying to meet the competing needs of getting people right to the full text, but providing sort of an escape hatch if it didn't work. Some problems with that is that some vendors' HTML does not want to be in a frame set. And we also interestingly found in usability testing that a lot of people don't notice this up here. They completely blank it out as if it were an ad. So it kind of might as well just be the full text. But oh well, it was the best compromise we could find. Next you'll see, if we were to click on see more options, you get, here's the full menu page, which you can see, as promised, has the library holdings directly on the page. If you click on this, you'd go to the detail on the OPAC that lets you request through the OPAC and do things like that. It also has, another interesting thing, is a little short URL here. An actual OpenURL URL is really long and really hard to put in email. So librarians like this for email reference and stuff, they can send people this or send it back and forth.
Integer on the end there.
Yep, you just got to trust me. What else is here that's worth pointing out? Oh, so a couple bells and whistles. There's a link to Ulrich's for this journal, a link to the WorldCat record for this journal, and both of these are actually pre-checked to avoid a dead link. It doesn't show up in this page unless umlaut's sure it'll take you to a real record, which it has to kind of use screen scraping to do because of a lack of a good API at that point for either of these things. WorldCat API may change that for WorldCat, I suppose. We can also, oh yeah, and it's worth pointing out that these library holdings are provided by an ISBN or ISSN match, is how it's pretty sure it found the right thing. If it doesn't have an ISBN or ISSN match, it resorts to a keyword match, but doesn't actually put the holdings directly on the screen because not being 100% sure, it doesn't want to send the users the stacks for something that isn't it. But if you clicked on this, you'd get the hit list in the OPAC of things that things are likely to match. Also, this kind of link resolver is traditionally thought of as being about article citations, but it can also get book citations from Google Scholar and WorldCat First Search, among other places, and I think that use is probably going to increase. OpenURL is a really good sort of machine directable entry point to our library's holdings. A lot of services that want to send people to the library can use OpenURL for books and other things. Here's an example of a book page. You can see it gets a cover from Amazon. It gets a description from Amazon down here. Still has the library holdings in there. The bells and whistles links have changed a little bit to link to Amazon, link to ISBN DB, which was a nice database I found that gives you the best a list of all the prices online to buy the book, because I was tired of always sort of letting Amazon monopolize our clicks to buy books. So this shows you all the online vendors and the best prices. That's good for that page. Next example is a 856 URL from the catalog as promised. We see all of these are from the SFX knowledge base. This one is from an 856 in the catalog. URLs from SFX are supposed to take you directly to the article level if the incoming citation was an article level. Of course, the URL you just got from Mark 856 is never going to do that. It's just a title level, so sort of some disclaiming text there. Kind of confusing for the user. What can you do? That's the data we've got. It tries to deduplicate to not show the same link from SFX and the catalog. In this case, it fails because of also various metadata control issues. But still, the catalogers liked this a lot because they were unhappy that stuff they had in the catalog wasn't showing up in SFX if it wasn't in the SFX knowledge base, and now it does. Another example is it actually does a search of Open Content Alliance and Project Gutenberg to see if there's e-text for the incoming citation. So here we have a copy of this book in Project Gutenberg that gives you a link to, which I think is pretty cool because there's not really a lot of ways for users to find that stuff if they don't know about it. But here, the OpenURL link resolver is a really good case where we have an incoming known item citation. Let's look for it and tell them if we have it. How do I get to the next tab? Oh, it reset itself, because that's what it does. We're not going to show it to you, but you'll have to trust me that using a web service provided by Umlaut that provides sort of HTML snippets, sections of that link resolver menu are put directly on my OPAC serial item detail pages. So the full text section of Umlaut, as well as those extra link sections from Umlaut, are directly on the serial item detail page in the OPAC using a web service provided by Umlaut, and some hacking of my OPAC, of course. Now we go. You can't see it here. Our slide didn't work. You just have to listen to me and have nothing to look at, I'm afraid. It's just how it goes sometimes. A couple interesting engineering things just to mention in passing is that we really tried. So this Umlaut's written in Ruby on Rails. My goal when I was especially abstracting from ROS and trying to make this work for many institutions at once, to do local configuration, you should not have to edit any file you checked out of SVN. All the local configuration is done through configuration files to avoid any kind of a fork like that. Up to if you want extreme customization, write your own classes and you provide the name of the classes in the configuration files. But you never have to edit stuff from SVN, so I think that's good for shared code and shared development. Another interesting thing is background service architecture. So Umlaut is consulting a bunch of external web services and does them in waves, sort of a wave 1 and wave 2 to get dependencies. So some subsequent ones can use metadata from previous ones. In any given wave, all the web services are run concurrently because some of these web services really are slow and you don't want to wait for one before doing the other. That was a little bit tricky with Rails, so we got it to work. Rails doesn't really like you to do things concurrently, but we got it to work out fine. And the next part about background services or concurrent services, some of these waves are done before returning the page to the user. Some of the waves continue to run after the page is returned to the user, and there's some AJAX stuff to bring it in when it's ready. And there's I wrote it, so unhumbly, a pretty neat little framework in Umlaut that does that in a really standard and extensible way. So when you add new things to the page, it just fits in, and the AJAX automatically updates it, and the framework also degrades really nicely when you don't have JavaScript to do some reasonable things to still give you access to that stuff. So that's just a quick pass by some interesting engineering. I think we spent a lot of time getting Umlaut really stable and a really good platform. As a result, it has a few really important things for the users, but there's a whole bunch of things that I think could be added on at this point that aren't there yet. And a quick pass by some of the things I'd like to be in Umlaut that I think could be added easily at this point. I just haven't had time, would include University of Rochester has a getting users full text style thing that checks the link to make sure it's not dead before sending the user there, and also skips ahead when it takes multiple clicks to get there. That could be included. I'd like Google Book Search to complement the OCA and Gutenberg search. This would also be a really good place as a known item citation to link to the OCLC identities service, since you're already looking at known item to do some really cool things. Doesn't at the moment use XISBN or ThingISBN at all, but there's some ways you can think of to use that to get the user something close to what they're looking for if you don't have their exact manifestation. There are ways I can think of similar in here to have some enhanced serial metadata that you get from the catalog or from an XISSN service about title changes to let the user know what's going on with dates and when the title's changed and stuff. I'd like a way of finding public access journal articles like I'm finding OCA and Gutenberg books. At first I was using Oyster, but it turned out Oyster isn't just public access, so I was sending my users to things that were asking them to pay $20, so that was no good. And I haven't found a good replacement for that, but I'd really like it to be here. There's so much public access available. I'd like to find some way to have a cited by service, so you have an article citation, you can see what cites it. I'm not even going to mention. Oh, the last one I'll mention, which is right now both Georgia Tech and Hopkins used SFX, so umlaut connects to SFX. There's no reason it has to connect to SFX. Connectors could be written to other knowledge bases. So that would really give you that sort of loosely coupled thing we're talking about, where you could switch out the knowledge base and still have umlaut on top, and that's something we both really like.
Right. So I'm not done. So one of the things that right now we have to start thinking about is U2 is somewhat stable. We need to start thinking about U3. And one of the things we'd like to do is sort of move away from this relational database model and move to a more document database model. Not only because my employer has an interest in something like that, but also because it sort of makes sense for what we're doing. We're gathering things that have all kinds of weird different data shapes, from the incoming context objects, which could be journals, books, patents, dissertations, to the web services that we're querying. We're kind of shoehorning them into an RDBMS schema just because it's there. And it's easy to do in Rails. But CouchDB or something like that, some sort of active document would be a good way to sort of get around that sort of limitation, because we're going to have problems scaling out to new services because they're going to have to shoehorn into the schema we've already built. And we've got to improve the performance. One of the reasons why we had already clicked on all the links is because the umlaut is really damn slow. And it's because it's querying a whole lot of things that are also really damn slow. And so it's got to wait for those to happen before it comes back. So we need to figure out how to speed it up. Caching could be one way. What we did at Tech is what I kind of call pre-coordinating the data, which means sucking it into a faster indexer and indexing it the way we need it to be. And so we can query that index rather than the actual live index somewhere else. And one of the things I really would like to see getting back to is this notion of the user-centric collection. Link resolvers are inherently institutional-centric collections. The institution defines what is available, whereas we wanted the user to be able to define what is available to them. I was a staff member of Georgia Tech. I was also I had borrowing privileges at Atlanta Fulton Public Library. So why don't I have access to both of those things at once? And we were using the WorldCat resolver registry to sort of do that sort of thing. But there was a major bug in that, which was actually asking Georgia Tech's SFX or Johns Hopkins SFX multiple times if it had things, which was slowing things down even more. So so getting back to that original goal of the person defining what their universe is.
So like everyone else is realizing at this conference, for this kind of open source software to be successful, you really need, I think, honestly, what I was thinking of, it's really the difference between what we called homegrown solutions 15 years ago and what makes them more feasible now is that we have the internet to really cooperate on these things. And I know the only way umlaut's going to keep working after I leave Hopkins is if other institutions are using it too. Georgia Tech is already, for whatever reasons, no longer using umlaut. So we're the only ones at the moment. It's at the point where if you wanted to adopt it, you're not going to need to do nearly as much work as me and Ross did. But it's still at the point where you have to be willing to tinker with it a bit. It's not going to work out of the box. But I think if we got 2 or 3 more people willing to tinker a bit, I think it would pretty soon get to the point where other people could adopt it with very little work, and it could really take off. So we're really hoping, if you like the idea of this, yes, please talk to me if you like the idea of it. I'm definitely committed to spending time helping people get it up and running if people are willing to spend some time themselves. And we have 90 seconds for questions. No, I'm not leaving Hopkins, but someday I'll leave Hopkins. Yeah, someday I'll die,
Andrew.
So it seems like you're building some really cool things on top of what other resolvers are out there, which is really awesome. But what about if we wanted to incorporate these sort of features into our existing catalogs or other systems? Do you guys think about building an API into these things?
Oh, umlaut's got an API. Some of it's more finished than others, but where it should be finished is sketched out. So since somebody needs it, we can get it finished pretty quick.
Yeah, the umlaut can both return, at least the umlaut 1 could, umlaut 2 a little more shady, but both return XML or JSON. It also had an un-API interface for every request too. So everything, you could easily put it in, and the way that he gets it into Horizon is, using its. Yeah. Any other questions?
Anyone else?
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Ross.